And so I will have a very warm, wonderful welcome for the one and only Loren Greiff, which rhymes with life. Loren, come on up to the stage here.
I'm
So,
right here.
so nice to meet you. Oh,
You,
we have some fun things to talk about. You have an amazing story that not many women get to live. And you are the embodiment of this energy, this joy, this passion for living. And will you take a moment and tell everybody a little bit about you?
sure. And thank you so much, Forbes Riley. I was saying to my husband this morning, it's like I feel like I'm meeting with like a famous soap opera star because it's like the perfect name. So there
And you
you go.
know what? And I spend time on Another World as the World Turns in General Hospital. So,
Okay, well, now we connect the dots. And that's what I like to do. My name, as I said, is Loren Greiff, and I say that very deliberately because it's not an easy name to spell or pronounce. But naturally, I never want to be the giver of grief. So needed to correct that right away. And my background and why I'm here is because I have a mission, a really diehard mission, and that is to end career victimization by elevating, accelerating, and celebrating one executive at a time. And so clearly, there are a lot of folks who may not have been on the market for a considerably long time, and that would be defined by anywhere between 3+ years, because obviously so much has changed. Pandemic, post-pandemic, return to office, DEI, the world is changing, and I didn't even mention AI yet. So the question is, like, how do you navigate? How do you empower yourself when the marketplace appears to be going bananas and crazy, and you are in a situation where you may be over 40 and you might feel like, oh my goodness, how am I going to ever compete? And so I work with a lot of folks who are addressing and also struggling with things around ageism. And so I always say this because I don't really care. I really don't. I'm 60 years old and I feel and act as immaturely as a teenager. And sometimes I need a little bit of schooling. But the point is that living longer isn't what ages us. It's really living smaller. And I want to really make that very clear. And so thank you for allowing me to share that because I think it is a driving force in our ever growing and ever aging demographics.
well, as my daughter said, Mom, let's go get a gold balloon that says 65 because in a month I turn 65.
Awesome.
I will share with you that I hadn't really thought about it until everybody and their mother who operates Medicare called going, are you retiring yet? And I'm like, no, not until I'm 90, maybe 95. So we'll have to have a conversation about that. So, Loren, when you grew up, was your family in the corporate world, not in the corporate world?
Good question. So my dad was an MD. He was a psychiatrist, which is why Dr. Grief would be a horrible thing to have happen with you. And then he decided, you know what? I really want to be using my talents in different ways. And he became one of the pioneers of what is now, I guess you could call organizational behavior, but what he specialized in was family businesses and all the chaos and the things that are going on. So he was in the corporate world after he really developed his own strain of psychiatry to help business owners, large corporations. So
And your mom?
um, my mom had her own business, and I would say she was not in the corporate world. She was never in the corporate world, and even though she had her own business, it was a different expectation within the household, right? It was still a very traditional, hey, you know what, like I have this business. But if I'm being honest, it was more of a pastime or hobby. And that's not to say she wasn't extremely talented, but it wasn't designed to be a revenue earner.
Well, about 45 years ago, that's how it went down. And one of the things that you and I get to move forward is that the needle has changed. Now, when you came out of college, what did you go to school for?
So I was a double major. I am kind of ambidextrous in my skill set. I am very left brain, right brain. And so I had a double major in business and art history. Go figure.
Where did you go to school?
Skidmore. Skidmore College.
Love Skidmore. I would have loved to have known that business was something you could major in. I was going to school to be a lawyer because when you were smart from Long Island, New York, you were either a doctor or a lawyer. If you didn't like blood, you had no choice. And that's
Right.
truly what I felt. I'm in a college going, I don't like law. I have no one connected to law. It just seemed like the only occupation that my guidance counselor could figure out. They didn't understand that advertising. In fact, this is a really bizarre story. Top of my class graduate, very smart. I did not know what the letter CEO stood for until I was in my 30s. I couldn't imagine this. You've only been around blue collar workers, guys that own their own job or mechanics. It never even dawned on me how businesses happened, how advertising happened, how CEOs in the C-suite was a thing because I never had any connection to it. And when it kind of unpacked, I was already in my 30s and I'm like, can you go to school for business to understand how to do this, to how to do what an org chart is, what a P&L? I had no idea. And I'm so disappointed in the educational system that let me down because it really would have been a huge boost for me to understand that concept. I literally remember a girlfriend of mine graduated my high school. She went to college for advertising. I'm sitting on the floor of her living room, and there's a book on advertising talking about how Coca-Cola got started. And it was if the Wizard of Oz pulled the curtain back and said, "You've never realized that you've been advertised to and marketed to your entire life." And I'm like, that's a thing? And it was crazy. Now, I assume that more kids know about this growing up. So what was your first job out of school?
My first job out of school was, and I'm a scrappy young thing, and I don't mean that in the immediate young area, but I am tenacious. And when I graduated from college, that was 1986. It was not a time where there were easy ins, even with referrals and recommendations. And so I climbed my way up, and my first kind of big job was working in the corporate offices at Ralph Lauren. And I was living in New York City. I know you talked about your time in
I was
California.
there. I was on Broadway when you were looking at Ralph Lauren.
Okay. Okay. So I was making a whopping 15 grand a year, which was like a gift, right? Like they were, oh, you get to work here and borrow our name. And I think that the rule was if you work through lunch, they would give you $5. $5. And so that was my lunch and dinner. Whatever I bought for $5, I would split, and I would walk 6 miles back and forth to the Upper East Side and back down to, Midtown, and do that 5 days a week. And that's what I think is one of the best parts about your career is you remember those humble beginnings. You remember working on a shoestring. It's almost like a production budget. Like, how am I going to be able to take this small amount of money and stretch it as far as I can? And eventually I did land in a global advertising agency. Funny that you should mention that. And I worked for J. Walter Thompson, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I had kids, and I was like, I don't love this anymore. This
And
is not like
that same time you were walking Upper East, I was walking to Hell's Kitchen, a 4-story walk up over a Chinese restaurant, working on Broadway, dreaming of dancing there. I didn't really care about the money. And never wanted to ever work for anyone else. I don't even think I ever interviewed. In fact, I didn't know what a real resume looked like until I was getting them when I was hiring people in my 40s, because I just had no design on working for anybody else. Isn't that interesting? I got that stuck in my head.
oh, that was smart.
Oh my gosh, I created a business that I made my first million at 27 because unlike you, $5 for lunch was not going to work it. And I was this fierce, it's funny, we have a lot in common about that word scrappy. I've done some very scrappy things in my life to overcome a lot of adversity and still continued living in Manhattan, making it work. So I'm very proud of you. And we could swap stories for days. But it's interesting that you like literally the other side of what I might have done. And in fact, I'll just tell you something very funny. And I know you remember this. In 1980s, do you remember stripograms? Somebody would come into the office.
Oh, yeah.
That was the
Was
company.
that your job?
That was my company I helped start.
Damn.
I did 10,000 singing and stripping telegrams, made over $1 million doing it because I was hell bent on embarrassing people who work for companies like you did. And I will tell you, it was in retrospect, oh my God, I give kudos to that young girl who had a beeper and would do 6 to 8 of these in a day and walked around with a boombox and high heel shoes and whatever it is I did to embarrass men. Yeah,
That's genius. Genius.
right.
Genius.
Thank you. Thank you. And it worked. And it allowed me to go into those companies and go, yeah, I don't want to do that. Also, I guess for whatever reason, and I now unpacked and why, I had a real resentment against men in charge. And I didn't know how to express it. And I watched my friends like you who worked for corporations when in those days it was very male run, very female subjugated. And something about me just said, I'm going to do anything I can not to be my reality. So there you go. But so now you're in this world and you've learned all kind of lessons. When you had your children, did you step out of work?
So I actually made a move. So I did step out of work. That's the answer. We left New York City and we moved to Chicago, and I raised my kids and basically was freelancing for a number of years and decided, you know what, I know, I see, I have experienced it myself that, of course, different ages, different stages of our careers, and our careers serve us for different reasons. There, people talk about the ladder to the lattice, and I was a climber. I was a vice president. I would think I was 27, 28 years old of this global advertising agency, but my priorities changed. It's not that I didn't like it. It's that I had other things that were way more important.
How
And
many
so
kids?
two,
So
and they live in New York.
and how old were you when you had them?
I was 25 and 30.
See, now this is just so funny for
Oh
me.
no, I was 30 and 33. Sorry, that was wrong.
Well, I love listening to this. And I hope that as you're listening to this, you see there's two sides of the exact same coin, two women who were in New York at the same exact time. And what you did was exactly opposite of what I did. I was so busy working that I almost forgot to have kids, did not find the love of at that moment. When I was finally 31, I met the father of my children, and we had tried for years and couldn't have kids, which I'm grateful for, because I remember saying to him when I left my house at 17, I looked at my mom and said, I love you, but I don't want to be you. And whatever that meant for me, that meant I didn't want the body size. She was 260 pounds my whole life. I've always been in fitness. And career-wise, I saw her give up her life for her children, which, while noble, and I loved it, I didn't think that was my path. And so thinking about having kids by 36, 37, 38, and then my parents both died within a year and all kind of crazy things happened. I didn't have my children until I was 42, which I'm so grateful I didn't miss it. The best part of my life is having these two beautiful kids. And by the way, I'm so efficient. They're twins. Had them both in the same day. Done. But I often say that my life would have been a very different, not better or worse, but like you did, because you do want that to be a priority. Having little children is the most, I think, the most precious time of your life. And when they grow up, it's never the same, is it? It's
No.
like, oh, I miss those little days when the 6 and 8 year olds thought the world began.
Mommy, 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 mommy.
No. And now they're 22 and I work with them and now it's mommy, mommy. And then they call me Forbes because we're in business together. Oh my gosh. What do your kids do, by the way?
So I have both of them live in New York City, and my older son is been in the same corporate job. He works for a global finance company, and he's been in that job for a little over 7 years since he graduated. And he's been promoted a number of times, and he's like Mr. Buttoned Up. And then I have the other one who is 27, and he actually works for a company that is incredible, and they're called Bucket Listers, and they are all about living your bucket list.
Very
So,
funny. I have a new movie coming out. I just did a short film called Bucket List Number 47. I may have to send it to you and your son. It's very funny.
oh yeah, for sure, for sure.
All right.
Yes.
So now you're in this corporate world and you see how all of this goes. And you're like, okay, a couple of things that you obviously learned that if people leave, they don't really get to come back, do they? At least not the same way that they thought.
They get to come back. There's no hard no that says that you can't, but you can't use the same points of entry that you did in the earlier point in time of your career. It's not the same game. It's always changing. I say this with the utmost honor and sincerity, and sometimes a dose of madness. The market is always changing. And so I need to be a student of the marketplace. I don't get to decide, I mean, sure, if I want to come in, but I got to know who my audience is, and I got to know what the dynamics are. I've got to know the factors. There's economic factors. There's, world factors out of our control. There are different levers that are happening in terms of just the pendulum, which way it's swinging. Used to be return to office, is, now it's a mandate almost. More and more companies, it's shrinking. we have to know that, because if you come and tell me, hey, I want to only work remotely, I'll say, hey, by the way, that sounds great, but just so you know, it might take your search longer because that inventory is diminishing. So
What
you
is the
need,
value, do you think, to an employee and an employer of the remote versus being in office?
well, there's a lot of discussion. I'll pick the employer side. Being in the office, they say, is essentially where all the collaboration happens, where productivity is increased. Now, this is the perception, but the data doesn't say that. The data says that during the pandemic, there was no loss in productivity. People were acting like grown-ups. They didn't need somebody babysitting over their shoulder and saying, "Are you coming in at this time? What are you doing?" Companies feel differently. And a part of the agenda, or the thing that they don't really want us to say out loud, is that they've invested in this real estate. They don't want it to just be a ghost town. So part of the reason why there's this mass demand to come back to the office is because that property is now vacant otherwise. So on the employee side, what they're benefiting from, I mean, while some people are hands up, like, I do want to have a separation between home and work, and I don't mind the commute. But for the majority of women who are taking on the brunt of child rearing, and in many cases, elderly parents, they're sandwiched between those two.
Yeah.
It's tough. And actually, I think it was today, there was an article, maybe it was in the Journal or the Times, about a lot of the resentments that are brewing between who's going in and getting the FaceTime and potentially the promotions, and who has opted out, and who isn't in the office, and some of the consequences that they are experiencing. So there's a lot of friction, no matter which way you rub it.
Well, it is interesting that, that you say, the hour that you save either way, getting ready and having to go to the office, that's 2 hours of productivity that I would rather have at home. Or the people just want, I guess it was stated about how much actual work you get done in an environment because people are walking by, or you're going out to lunch, or you're doing this. It's an interesting conversation. Or are you the person who can stay highly motivated at home, or do you not get as much done? Interesting conversation. And then the real estate, throwing that in there, huh?
Right?
As an
I could
outsider.
hear the cartoon bubble going in your head right now.
Yeah. Well, because my entire team works around the world remotely, and we've gotten great levels of productivity. You just set deadlines and demands, and I don't really care how you get it done, just get it done. Uh,
Same.
and that's been interesting, and I love it. And I'm sitting here in my sweatpants, and I'm not going to change. Um, although sometimes I do go to the television studio, and then I have to get all dressed out.
Mhm.
But so you've created a company based on recruiting for this, haven't you?
So just a small tweak here. I'm not a recruiter. A recruiter's job is to broker the deal between the company and the candidate. I
Okay.
was a recruiter. I was a recruiter for 20 years, and I left. I actually quit on a Monday, which I just like to include because I don't know that many people that quit on a Monday. And I decided that I was seeing too much. I saw how broken it was from the inside out. And I
Hey,
didn't.
wait, stop right there. When you say broken, what are you referring to?
So when I say broken, and for those of you who are in a job search, have been in a job search, you know that all of those applications get dumped into this big system called the applicant tracking system, the ATS. So you basically push a button, send all this stuff through, apply, and then there's a cattle call, a mass market. It's like everything gets dumped into this system. We don't know from company to company what the filters are. We don't know if there are how many biases there are built in. We don't know. Now, of course, there is supposedly oversight, but from the back end, as I was seeing it, even if you are engaged in that search, the issue is that somebody's going to get that position. And if it's not you, now what? What, you're going to go back in the system? You're going to just keep recycling that effort and maintain all of your mojo and be able to have some level of of clarity about how you're going to crack this nut, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of exhaustion. It's a lot of lost dignity and self-respect.
Hey, I'm an actress. I'm used to getting rejected every day, all day. I mean, it ate away at my self-esteem, which is why I, at some point, just had to stop. Even though I worked all the time, no matter how good you are, at a certain level, you only get 1 out of every 100 jobs, which means you had 99 rejections. Talk about eating away your mojo. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. So, and you know this because, I mean, you don't have insurance as an actor. You don't have a lot of these things. And as you get older, you have a mortgage, you have college, you have all these things, and your livelihood is in jeopardy.
Right.
And so what I really decided was more important than climbing a ladder or anything like that is really to provide a solution. So whether it's this position, the next, or the next, or the next, there is a easy framework that can help you to navigate what's called the hidden job market.
So what is PortfolioRocket?
It's my system. It's the company that teaches executives how to learn to navigate through their networks, to build networks, to revitalize networks, because most people will come and say, hey, you know, I've been doing this job for 10, 15 years. I've been heads down and my network is atrophied. And so how do you leverage the thing that moves the needle the most, which is cutting the line and being able to build those relationships that are sustainable, and also do not put you, and I'm just going to say this, in the cesspool of candidates.
Can you give us one actionable insight into that to revitalize your network?
Sure, absolutely. So the easiest way to revitalize your network is to do kind of the classic show me you know me. That's a very old sales line. But you cannot expect your network to keep up with you because you haven't kept up with them. I mean, it's just human nature. So if you're going back and you are meeting somebody that you knew, a former boss, a colleague, a partner, somebody in your past, do yourself a favor and find out a little bit about what they've been doing in the meantime, however you can. The easiest way is LinkedIn. Most of those people, they're right there. Have they switched jobs? Have they moved to a different city? What are they doing? What are they talking about? You can pick up a lot of clues just right there. And then when you get whatever correspondence you're going to do, whether it's email or you're going to use the DMs on LinkedIn, do not make it about you. Do not knock on the door and say, well, yeah, I'm on the market. And by the way, I want to know if you know somebody over at Lululemon or Cisco or whoever that is. Make it clear that you are sincerely, and please do not do this if it's insincere anyway. Like usury behavior is not what networking is about. And that's not where the equity is either. So Adam Grant talks about in his book, Give and Take, there are givers, takers, and matchers. And only one of them builds a network.
Wow, that's very interesting. You know, it's funny because I teach pitch. I teach the art of communication.
Yeah.
And I recently revitalized one of my trainings and calling it elevator pitch 2.0, because most people have no idea how to speak to another human being. They show up and throw up. Hi, here's all the things I've been doing and blah, 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 blah. And they never even look to see if the other person heard or comprehended what someone else is saying. And I've made a very hefty living understanding how to get that person to listen and take action based on the words I say, because it's never about me.
Mm-hmm.
It's been
That's
a
right.
fascinating conversation. Yeah.
So this is
match up our people.
yes. So this is a different strain of pitching.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, people buy from people, people hire people, people will always need people. I don't care how much AI there is. And I mean, I've been hearing more and more lately, like, oh my goodness, I'm going to leave that typo in my email or my correspondence, because then they'll know that I'm the real deal.
That is a huge fear. I'm sorry, but I have that, I've watched every movie and it never ends very well for the humans.
Yes. Yes. So that's the wrap up on PortfolioRocket, and really a very simple, almost even stupidly simple, basic way of really engaging, re-engaging, and really nurturing your network, because it is. I mean, it's a garden. And I always say, friends are like ice cream. Just some days you want a different flavor. And that's kind of the way it is with your network too. When you have those people in your life, you're not looking for work anymore.
So would it be fair to say to all my listeners who might be a little bit older that there is hope for them?
Hope is is an acronym that I use called hearing other people's experiences. And so 100%, I can promise you, if you want it and you're willing to do it, but not the old broken way. If you are willing to go and invest in your network, in your people, find out how you can be the broker to help them. Who do they want to meet?
Mhm.
How do they want, what's something that's on their second quarter must do thing? How could you maybe connect those dots together for them? Find out what's going on with them and be a catalyst for whatever that thing is that is important for them.
As
Be a
as
part of it.
as we come to the close of our interview, I know we only have a couple of minutes. What's your hope for the future?
Mm. Oh, I have so many. As it relates to my topic, is that in 5 years, the demographic is, I mean, it's already happening now, but the crescendo is scheduled for 5 years, where there will be a drought in the talent pool. And my hope is for the audience of people who are in decision-making roles, that they stop with the biases and prejudices around what older people can do and how they can impact the world of work. Because so many of them are getting kicked out and they didn't sign up for an expiration date.
Oh, I love it. And finally, how do we get in touch with you, my girl?
Oh, best way, LinkedIn. I it's my second home address, and you can check out my website, PortfolioRocket.com.
I love that, Loren. This has been absolutely an honor and a treat to get to talk to you and explore a part of the world that I find fascinating, especially now that I am hiring so many people. I would love you to come back at some point and maybe we could delve into culture. Is that something that you have some takes on?
I sure do. I
Yeah.
sure do.
We're gonna
I have been, this was the highlight of my day. No joke. You are literally like energy personified. So thank you for all of that.
Well, you are insight personified into a world that I find absolutely fascinating. And I really not only love, but I cherish your perspectives. We're going to have you back. I want to talk about culture because, as someone who now is the top CEO of my own company, how to build that, how to recruit smart. And I think you've got some great insight. So, everybody, give a big round of applause to Miss Loren Greiff, like life, which is abundant everywhere and no grief here. I just love it. I'm going to play with this all day long. Go have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. And I will see you back here on the Forbes Factor. Mwah. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you so much.